Okay, so what I want to talk about tonight is the difference between, what we're talking about when we talk about meditation and gnosis. So meditation being something that is taught everywhere now, you know what I mean? Because, okay, we've got it in Buddhism, we've got Zen meditation in Japan, we've got the sort of like, what would you call like the sort of spiritual meditation now that everyone does? You've got the sort of stress relief meditation, you've got transcendental meditation, Vipassana, etc. Vipassana, if you want to pronounce it. But Gnosis, I guess you could say Gnostic meditation, which is, I don't know, idiosyncrasy, is something a little different. Or it's not something different, but it has a different focus. So when I'm talking about meditation, you know, there's something we have to understand, which is sort of why we're meditating. So all these schools of meditation, you know, like if I'm learning, like, you know, if you talked about meditation years ago, you would have been talking about, you know, I'm talking about in the 50s and this sort of thing, in the really early years when meditation was sort of coming over from the East. You know, it was something that sort of got tied to yoga, which was also, it was sort of popularized in magazines. Do you know what I mean? Like it was sort of brought over in the sort of Women's Day magazines as being this sort of stress relief thing, you know. And then the same thing, then it also gained a lot of strength in Theosophy as well in England. But again, it sort of entered the modern day now as being this sort of stress relief thing. You know what I mean? Focus your mind, meditate. You want to do well as a tech bro, you got to meditate. Do you know what I mean? You want to have a successful startup company, you need a garage and you need to meditate every morning, you know, and then have your, whatever it is, your super duper mushroom latte and weights, sauna, what else? Ice bath, your plunge pool ice bath, etc., etc., etc. I don't know what the current thing is. There's always a new thing. Anyway, this is all fine, but this is quite important because the meditation that we teach in Gnosis is about reaching the void. That's sort of the goal of meditation, to reach the illuminating void. Of course, we use meditation for other things. We use meditation with the chakras. We literally have hundreds of types of meditation in Gnosis. You know, we talk about working with the chakras, working with dissolving the ego, various practices of concentration. But the ultimate goal of meditation is to reach the illuminating void. This is very important. You know, it's not about, as you said, stress relief. It's not about trying to focus on my goals or my ambitions. It's not about sort of spiritual sensations, because a lot of times it's like that. We want to sort of feel like a tingling or a fantastic awakening feeling or a strong emotion. You know what I mean? Many people almost are actually looking for almost like what you would have, like a drug sensation. They want to have a fantastic experience and see lots of things and colors, etc. Not that the meditation we're doing won't lead to that, of course, but it's the focus is so important in your meditation. And this is what we mean by a preliminary ethics, is that when we're going to meditate, we have to prepare ourselves. The yogis had this. They had 8 principles of preparation: right thought, right feeling, right action. I can't remember them all off the top of my head, but basically the idea that in order to prepare for meditation, we have to have a good base to come from. As I said, if I'm coming from a base of just wanting to fulfill my ambitious goals when I start meditating, I'm not going to get anywhere. I'm never going to reach the illuminating void because my meditations will come from a place or a base of desire. If I'm just desiring spiritual experiences, my meditations are going to, at best, give me one of those and at worst fail. Do you know what I mean? And so this is really important, you know, that there needs to be the goal is emptiness. Whereas, what is it? In meditation, you know, the goal is the void. But once you start, that's not what's important. Very complicated thing. A famous board game designer said that once. In board games, the most important, he said, in board games, the aim is to win. But once the game starts, that's not what's most important. Meaning having fun is important. But in this case, what I'm saying is a Zen thing. Even though the goal is the illuminating void, if you desire the illuminating void, you won't get it. And this is where there's that problem. Yeah. But at the same time, we still have to have that goal. If you don't have that goal, you'll have one of these. You're just going to be looking for some sort of fulfillment of some attachment, of some desire. Okay, so that's why we need a level of preliminary ethics in order to get the mind into a good state so that we can then relax in a meditation. This may seem strange to people because they use meditation to relax, if you understand what I mean. So I spend my whole day stressing, running around, doing all this sort of stuff. Do you know what I mean? Running around, going to the, Going to the shops, going, picking up all the things, etc., running after the children. And then I'm tired, so I sit down and do a practice. I do a meditation and I clear my mind and go, what's it in Kung Fu Panda? Inner peace, inner peace. And then I feel inner peace and then everything's fine. You know what I mean? I'm fantastic. I'm so happy. And then what can I do? Well, then I can run around again and I can get stressed out again. Okay, so we actually want to have a good base to start with. So the good housemaster, this is something we're going to talk about as a whole lecture later on, but I'm just introducing it to us now. If we want to be successful in the practice of meditation, we need to have our life in order. If my life has no order, so for instance, one of the most important things about meditating is consistency. You know what I mean? You may find when you come to class that these meditations are really good. They're always very good in the class. You have the force of the people, the instructor who sort of spends all his time doing this, and you sort of have that force. You may have noticed this if you went on, like for instance, like a Vipassana retreat. You sort of feel this fantastic, everything works well, all your meals are provided and all you do is meditate, and it's great, But actually the most important meditation is the one you do every day. Even if it's 5, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, that's the most important meditation that you do because it's consistent. You know what I mean? And so punctuality and consistency is the most important thing in the work of meditation. If you want to succeed in meditation, you must have punctuality. Same time, same place every day. If you find a place, doesn't matter how you meditate, you only need to have a straight back. Everything else doesn't matter. So you can be standing up, you can meditate standing, it's true. If you fall asleep all the time, meditate standing up. It's a little less comfortable, but it's doable. Yeah? You can meditate lying down. If you get really stressed out and have anxiety, meditate lying down. You have no problem. You're never going to fall asleep, so just lie down. Then you can relax really well. If you're sitting in the chair, perhaps, like this, or you can sit in the lotus style, with your legs tied in a fantastic pretzel knot, like that, or half lotus, just half the legs in a knot. Doesn't matter. Legs crossed, as long as the back's straight, and you can breathe freely, you can move your energy well. We'll go through this in a minute. Then it doesn't really matter. But if you don't, what you want to do is to find the same time and same place. So if you're in your house, it's good to make a place for it, a spot to meditate, a location. Like a nice chair in your room, for instance. Meditating in bed is not really recommended because it's where you sleep. So all it takes is a little bit of a, you know what I mean? A little bit of a slide down the backboard before you're going, You can do it if you want to, if you feel sufficiently bold, go for it, you know what I mean? But I suggest a nice chair, a nice seat, something relaxing, a place for it. If you have an altar, better, you know what I mean? So, but if my house is not in order, now it's not just about the physical house, it's about my life. My life needs to have a sense of order, if you understand what I mean. There must be punctuality in my life. If I'm not getting up, if I'm getting up like really late all the time, if I'm going to bed at crazy hours, if my money, if I don't have any control over my money, if I don't have any control over my time, if I'm always, like you have a job that's just kind of throwing you all over the place, like what's it called, the job, like a shift worker where you're doing days and nights, it's going to be very hard for you to meditate. Really hard. You can't be punctual with your practices. And this happens all the time. People say, I really want to come to Gnosis, I want to come to your classes, but I'm a shift worker, or my wife does this, she works nights and I do this. And so I have no control over my time. So I'm not the master of my house. That's what I mean. I don't mean my physical house, I mean my life. That's what I mean by the good housemaster. The person who's in control of the situations of their life. And this happens all the time. People say, I can't do this, I can't do that. It's this fault, it's my job, it's my kids, it's my, we have lots of kids, yeah. There's kids on the front row, you know what I mean? All these lovely young children here. But at the same time, they go to bed while they sit quietly in class, which is very, very good. Yeah? We just have to learn to take control, which is tricky, especially in the gentle parenting environment. But, you can figure it out. Hint. So, good housemaster, right? That's what it means. I will go and we'll do a whole lecture about how to bring order and control into our life and slowly allow this sort of mode of teaching to sort of take over and sort of become the way of functioning. Like now our way of functioning is usually based on whatever desires in the human machine, which is not the best, but it's just the way it is. So this means life needs to be in balance. As I said, it also means we need a level of balance in our lives. If I'm not actually doing some sort of work on the ego, a lot of this stuff isn't going to work. Yeah, I'm going to try and do this practice. I'm going to try and get and do my meditations, and it's not going to go anywhere. You know what I mean? Because if I spend my whole day flipping in anger and frustration, if my emotions have no control, like I have a complete and utter meltdown because somebody, canceled my favorite television show or something like that, or I have a complete meltdown because somebody mucked up my coffee, you know what I mean? And I'm, I can't deal with it. There's like a level, you understand what I mean? There's a level of emotion that's acceptable. You hear about someone who passes away or something, there's a level of, like a decorum, I'm sorry, and you feel in your heart sadness, but not losing yourself, not jumping onto the coffin like an old Italian lady, There's a level of balance in the life. Without balance in the emotions, balance in the mind, and when I talked about the good house mouse, I was talking about balance in our physical life. Again, it's not going to work because what's going to happen? I'm going to try and do this meditation. I'm going to try and do this consistent practice, and then I'm just going to not feel like it one day. So I'm just going to stop. Do you know what I mean? Because I have no control of my emotions. You know what I mean? It's the same thing as letting yourself be controlled by your emotions all the time. So, that's it, I just got such a strong feeling, such a strong vibe. I've got to go here. I just got to throw everything away and just move to India. People like that never get anywhere. They go from one thing to another, to another, to another. They never get anywhere. We're talking about getting somewhere. That's the whole point of Gnosis, yeah? So, okay, moving on. To live well, this is the same thing. This is part of being balanced, eat well, look after your body, all this sort of thing. If you're sick, that happened to me. I realized I had to slow up on the dairy and gluten and even sugars in my life because I couldn't meditate because I had so much mucus. I tried to meditate. And you try and do this. And you couldn't do it because of all this. I didn't do it because it was a fad or because everybody else was doing it. I got accused of that many times. Everyone would say, you're gluten-free. I said, look up, mate, if I couldn't be, I'd eat every burger in the world. But unfortunately, this is the way it is, And then that mucus blocks on my right ear and then I can't hear. So it gets even worse. So that's the thing. Like, this is something by live well. Observe your human machine. Observe your body. Observe yourself. The same thing, if I'm always sick, I can't do my practices. This is why they taught Hatha yoga, the yoga of the body. We teach the Lamasery gymnastics so that we can have a good physical body. We do this every morning. And it's great. It keeps your body limber and strong. And in doing so, you're able to continue doing your practice. You can sit up nice and straight. Like, for instance, like when you're sitting in the middle of the room, if you strengthen your core muscles, you're able to sit in the middle of the room. You won't fall asleep, even if you're working all day as a builder. If you can learn to sit in the middle of a room, you'll be fine, like on the Zafu. I never fall asleep on the Zafu, yeah? It's fantastic. So, live well. Last one is transmutation. We need to transmute our sexual energy. This is interesting because, this is something that's taught by almost no institutions, is that there's a huge connection to our entire energetic body and our sexual energy, our sexual creative substance. This is really important. I can't stress enough. We're going to be talking about beginning to feel the body as energy. That's the whole point. Like, the first part of meditation is about feeling the body as energy. And one of the first meditations, I think it's Meditation Chamber Lecture 2 or something, is going to be about that. We're going to do this practice and we're going to feel the physical body as energy. Then we're going to feel the energetic vital body, then the astral body, etc. And so we actually have to start to feel the body as an energetic vehicle, which is what it is. You know what I mean? So, if I'm not transmuting my energies in my physical body, then all of this is going to be very difficult. So this is going to be a huge hindrance. A lack of transmutation is a massive hindrance in reaching the illuminating void and in reaching depth in meditation, because we're constantly losing our fluids, we're constantly losing that energy. We want to be not just retaining it, but transmuting it, as we've taught in many, many classes before this. All right. So that brings us to the 6 stages of meditation, which is the real proper, this is what we're going to be doing in Meditation Chamber. I'm going to teach you lots of different ways to meditate in Meditation Chamber. Of course, I'm going to teach you lots of different meditations that you can do, different practices, working with the elementals of the body, working with the mantra and wu to go to the void, working with different parts of the being, working to reach levels of concentration, the ego, etc. How to dominate the mind. Fantastic. But we have to have an understanding of how meditation works. You see, when we're meditating, right, it's like this. And I should have drawn it earlier, but it's like this. This is the periphery of the mind, like that. And at the center is the consciousness. Yeah? So this here is the mind. And in the middle, let's use a different color for that. In the middle is consciousness. Yeah, in the middle is the consciousness. And we are trying, in our silence, in our work of silence, we are trying to go and reach that center. That's what we're looking to do. Yeah? You can't do that violently. It's like, have you guys ever seen those, like, a lot of people do those videos and that of like, those slime liquids? You know, sort of slime liquids, and like people make them and you sort of make it into a ball, and then when you throw it, you can bounce it and you can kind of jump on it, but then if you stand still, you sink into it. Do you know what I mean? Like that?
Black?
Sorry?
Black?
What's that?
It's like when you punch it, it's really hard, and then when you put your hand in slowly, it like melts.
Yeah. See, the young people know what's going on. You know. I unfortunately don't have my bachelor on TikTok. It's crazy. Like I have been studying, you know what I mean? But I'm just not quite there yet. Anyway. Oh, it's on YouTube. Okay, there you go. This is my from. Okay, oobleck, which is a substance that when you hit it is completely solid, like a brick wall. But when you put your hand in slowly, you can actually put your hand in like a liquid. So it's something that goes firm. And this is what it's like. If you approach the mind violently, you know, then you're just going to bounce off. You're not going to get anywhere.
So is the mind the whole circle? Is that what you're saying?
All this part inside here is mind.
Okay.
Yeah, everywhere between the periphery and the center is the mind.
And the consciousness is the center. That's what.
Yes,
yeah.
That's right. So we're trying to reach the center. And so if I come in hard, I'm just going to just glance off, or I'm just going to kind of go like this, let's be honest, you know, or just get stuck in here somewhere, and it's not going to go deep. What we're actually trying to do is sort of gently reach this center. And when we reach the center, the consciousness will provide illumination out. Yes, so the consciousness will react. When we reach the center, the centripetal force going towards the center, the mind will the consciousness will react by pushing it back out. And that's illumination. That's literally what illumination is, okay? When we bring the consciousness into activity. Usually the consciousness is asleep at the center of the mind. Yeah, that's why the consciousness is asleep. You can't hear the consciousness. It's busy being completely stifled by the mind. Now and again, it sort of just leaps out. You know, like, don't do it. And you're like, what? I'm sorry, I'm too busy doing it. No, don't do it. So we're trying to reach the consciousness at the center of the mind. That's the purpose of the meditation. As I said, when we're here in Gnosis, what we're looking for is a deep, a profound meditation. Therefore, we're looking for experiences of samadhi, experiences of the void. Okay, how do we reach that? Okay, let's explain. So we start first, and these go downwards like this. Yeah, we start in the first step. The first step is asana or asana. And this pertains to our posture, but also the relaxation of the body. So I've already started by saying that it doesn't really matter how you're sitting as long as you are relaxed or able to relax. There's that thing they talk about, is it called the Alexandra Project or something? I forget what it's called now. The
Alexander method.
Yes, so the one where you sort of imagine like a rope going through your head, and then it goes to the sacral, to the bottom of the spine, and it sort of holds that up, and then everything else kind of dangles. Do you know what I mean? Like that. Sorry, that was a puppet joke. Okay, so anyway, what we're doing when we're sitting in a chair, that's a great method, because it means what? The arms are relaxed, the legs are relaxed, the body's relaxed, but you're not falling over. You know, people say, "Can I relax everything?" I tried to. One of my students, Rob, I should blur out the name. He's just a bit of an intellectual, but it's just really funny. I tried to crack his back. You know that thing where you crack people's backs? They sort of put their arms together like that, and then you relax back, and then you can crack them. You can crack their back. And I just said, lean back. I just said, like, relax and lean back. And he just fell on me. And I'm like, no, like relax. And he's like, He couldn't quite get it, you know. And so, yeah, when I say relax, I don't mean fall over. I mean, the spine stays nice and straight, yeah, but the rest of the body, it drops down. And so we really relax the body. Again, it doesn't matter. If you're Oriental, sit in the Oriental style. Western, sit in the Western style. If you're Western, but you don't like Western things and you feel a bit Oriental, sit in the Oriental style. It doesn't actually matter. Do you remember what the Dalai Lama said that? When someone asked about joining Buddhism because they didn't like Christianity, he said, if you're Christian, he said, if you're Western, you should just be a Christian. He's talking about exoteric. Yeah, he's talking about the outer school here. You know what I mean? Not esoteric Buddhism. But he's saying you should just be a Christian. He said, however, on the other hand, if you have been quite traumatized, then I would understand why you'd want to come to Buddhism. You know. Question?
Oh no, I was just going to say there's like a Zen story of where they would actually tie a bit of their hair to an actual rope, and so if they fell asleep, it would pull their hair and would wake them up.
Man, they've got some good techniques, huh? Good, but a little violent, but good. And they hit you with a stick too.
Yeah. We got that when we went there.
Oh, nice. Was it hard?
It was a fake hitting of the stick. Like, it was like we asked for the hitting.
Oh, come on, they got to do it properly.
Yeah.
Okay.
We were in the Zen temple, yeah.
Yeah, there's a group that's just started in Japan, and they went across for a retreat over there. Okay, Gnostic group we're talking about. Okay, so as I said, posture, straightforward. It should be straightforward, but yeah, I forgot to mention, close your eyes. A lot of the Buddhist techniques say to keep the eyes open. That's fine if you really want to, but honestly, you need to separate from the senses, right? It's way easier to separate from sight if your eyes are closed. Yeah, if you have them open, you're sort of just asking for it. Maybe if you're sitting up in the top of a temple in some beautiful lamasery in the middle of nowhere, sure, keep your eyes open because nothing happens. But if you're in the middle of like a house with 5 children running around screaming and telling you why the other one caused all the problems in their life, close your eyes. And you've immediately lost one sense. You know, and if you keep going that track, they'll all disappear and you can experience the illuminating void while sitting on the toilet trying to ignore your children. Okay, that's a joke. Okay, continuing on. So, relaxation of the body. Okay, so this begins obviously pretty straightforward. We relax the body. This is important. It's important whether we've been meditating for 5 minutes, first time or 100 times. Don't forget to relax the body. The reality is, Samael reduced the entire of the esoteric work to relax and remember. Like the whole thing. All of the work of Gnosis. He just said, relax and remember. That was it. In other words, relax the bodies, relax all the centers of the human machine, and then remember the being. So relaxation is really important. It's paramount. Okay. Next, pranayama. This means the control of prana or control of breathing. Obviously, pretty straightforward. It's about the breathing exercise. However, there is something important that we need to introduce at this point, which is also the beginning to introduce sleepiness. If you do not introduce sleepiness, you will not be able to meditate, period. It just won't work. It just won't work. You ever meet people who've been meditating for a long time and they're a bit queer? Do you know what I mean? I don't mean that as in like homosexual. I'm talking about as in like they're just like a bit, like in the original use of the word. You know how like you can't use words anymore? Like I was so happy, I was so gay. That man was a bit queer. He was a bit, like where they're just a bit kind of like odd or a bit strange. And, like I've met quite a few guys and sort of, you've been doing Zen and things like this for a really long time. And like, they're just a bit like, kind of like that. Yeah, you're kind of like, hey mate, how you going? I was like, good, yes. And you're like, okay. Like you seem super highly strung for a guy who meditates for like 7 hours a day. Do you know, like you seem as though if I did the plastic bag test, which means if I got a plastic bin bag, filled it with air, and then ran up behind them and just threw it on them, would they scream and fall into a fetal position? And I think the answer is yes. If you just think, oh, some idiot's playing a prank on me or something, then you're fine. But if you freak out, your mind's a bit too crazy. And so what happens is you sit there and you just think. And then you force the body into stillness through physical willpower. And what you do is you make yourself go a bit crazy. You actually make yourself, the term is neurotic. We're not allowed to use that word anymore because it got used negatively against women for years. But in reality, you make yourself neurotic by overthinking. Do you know what I mean? And also overthinking, and also like, what do you call it? Like just causing problems in human machines. Like forcing yourself just to sit there and this is fine. Yeah, I'm doing really well. And staring at the black of your eyelids while your body is like, I need to move. You know what I mean? But you've held yourself there. So that's not enough sleepiness, yeah? Right? Because I don't want to liken it to drinking, but it's a good example, you know what I mean? It's like, you have a couple of drinks and you're like a little bit tipsy. You know, like when you go, someone goes to a party or something, okay, Gnosis, we don't drink, I know that. But anyway, so, you have a couple of drinks and, you're sort of tipsy and then, the tongue loosens up and you chat with people and you can dance and suddenly you got the moves, right? But there's like a moment, and there's these two moments. So before you have a couple of drinks, you're at the party and you can't, it's like you're like a robot, you can't quite get the moves. Do you know what I mean? Because you haven't had the couple of drinks. And then the other side, this is the worst example. But then if you have like 5 drinks or something, then you're suddenly stumbling all over the floor. And this is what it's like with sleepiness. You actually have to have just the right amount of sleepiness. If you have no sleepiness, you're really tense and the mind you can't relax properly because the emotional center doesn't relax properly. The mind doesn't relax. You're not just relaxing the physical body, you have to relax the mind. And if the mind doesn't relax, the mind's spinning like crazy and in control, you're never even going to break the side of that bubble. You're never even going to enter into the praise. You're just not going to get nowhere and you're going to go quite crazy. But on the other side, if you just fall asleep, then obviously you're going the other way. So you need, you need to be 50% awake, 50% asleep. It's often said to be 50% meditation and 50% sleep. So 50% and 50%. And you want that straight. Yeah? Samael gives a much better example. Instead of talking about alcohol, Samael says that you need to have good bread, and you have 50% flour, 50% water. And if you don't do the mixture just right, you're not going to get good bread. It won't rise or it'll be too soft, etc. Okay, so this is important. And honestly, this is kind of the whole thing. Learning to relax and getting the 50-50 is like, it's like 80%, 70% of the battle. It's kind of the whole thing. If you don't get that preliminary right, the rest of your meditation is going to kind of go nowhere. Okay. So, all right, that's it. So with the control of breathing, you can deepen that relaxation, relax the emotions. You can relax yourself to a deeper degree by adding this sleepiness. And then what you're beginning to feel slowly is, there's more than that. 1, you're beginning to store prana, so you're beginning to get more energy inside the body. And 2, you are beginning to control and see the body as energy. That's what's going on. Yeah, and you can do breathing. So like deep breathing is good, the beginning of pranayama. But eventually you're going to hit a point where you're no longer deep breathing. In fact, you're barely breathing. And that's when you're starting to look at pratyahara. Yeah. Now, pratyahara, these obviously Sanskrit words, means to separate from the senses. Pretty straightforward. So in order to do this, for instance, the yogis and Zen used to give the example of like focusing on the tip of your nose or like on your toe. I know it was one guy in my class kept saying, focus on your big toe. A missionary, sorry. You focus on one point until everything else disappears. So you focus on your nose. I remember one guy used to do it. He said, touch your nose and then move your finger and then focus on the feeling like of having just touched it. But that just made my nose itchy. It never really worked for me. Do what you want to do. I don't mind. But you focus on that. And then the whole point is to sort of put all your attention to that one point until everything else disappears. So the room disappears, your body disappears, and all you feel is the point, just the one point. And then the next stage of meditation, you move away from the point. So you've sort of focused it all in, and then you can move on to the next part. But that's the whole process. The idea is to move away from your senses. So to be fair, I would say that one drops into pratyahara. This is an interesting point. One drops into pratyahara, meaning that it's like, you know what I mean? It's like you can't force pratyahara. Pratyahara is typified, is that the word? Or an attribute of pratyahara is like a really short breath, a really, really shallow, short breath. You know what I mean? And it's like you're almost not breathing at all. And then you can't feel the room around you at all. But if you just try and do that, it doesn't work. So you sort of have to find your way there through breathing exercises. Yes?
Is that when you can't like feel the physical body anymore.
Yes, that's right. Sense of touch.
Yeah.
I've said that a lot of times, that the hardest sense to break is the sense of touch, because it's your body. You know what I mean? You no longer feel the chair. You no longer feel the air or feel those over the skin. You don't feel the body. You don't feel the room. Yeah. Like smelling, that's pretty easy, unless you're meditating in like a really close proximity and you've been having like lots of curry. Just saying, man. Some of those Vipassana retreats, man.
The lentils, man.
A lot of lentils, a lot of chickpeas. Chickpeas, mate. They're dangerous. They're loud. Anyway. So you may have the perfect, beautiful setting, you know what I mean? Yeah? Okay. But you see, you can let all that go. But the sense of touch is always the harder one. You know, because it's your body, it's you, it's me. You got to let go of that. You can't get into the mind until you let go of all the senses. Okay? So yeah, it's in that moment, as Kai says, you're right, it feels like that moment, it's like you've separated from the whole body. Yep, that's how you know you're in Pratyahara. You're in the state of Pratyahara, yeah? Okay. All right. So Pratyahara causes us, if we reach Pratyahara properly, we then move on to concentration, or dharana. And dharana is the first stage of a deeper meditation. So this, to be honest with you, most schools of meditation actually finish here. This is sort of where they're going. They just want to separate you from the senses. They may talk a lot about samadhi, but mostly they're just trying to separate you from the senses. And for most people, the experience of separation of the senses is like a spiritual euphoria. They've never experienced it before, and they're like, whoa, oh my God, I think I experienced the void. I'm like, no, you just experienced not being in. You just experience yourself out of your body for a second. And they're like, whoa. And that's fine, but we want to go deeper. So once I've reached this state of Pratyahara, once I've reached this state of separating from the senses, I then need to concentrate the mind. And so what we're doing here is we're actually concentrating the dispersed rays of the mind. Dispersed rays of the mind. So the mind is dispersed. The mind is dispersed. Everything that you're thinking about all the time, your mind is there. So the mind has 300,000 clans. That's 300,000 parts, and they're everywhere. Yeah, they're on all, and 49 regions too. We'll go into that another day because it's sort of not really pertinent to tonight's lecture. But you've got all of these parts of the mind, and they just go off. Yeah. So when we're all the things we're thinking about, there's little parts of the mind on them. Yeah. All of this stuff, all of my past, all my memories, the mind just sort of goes off. And so what we're trying to do after we've actually separated from the senses is then try and gather together all the dispersed rays of the mind. Yeah. And so we do that in a very simple way by actually beginning to watch the thoughts. Yeah. And we're looking to find silence in the mind. Again, these can be done in different ways. So the practice I usually give is learning to just watch the mind and observe the thoughts, yeah? But there are different practices. I mean, there's I can't remember the exact one. In the six paths of breathing, I think there's one where you're sort of, after you've got the point, you then sort of try to move that over the whole body and then sort of feel it deeper. I can't remember it exactly.
You observe all the organs of the body.
Yeah, you're trying to sort of increase that concentration. It's like you sort of put it onto the nose and then you try to increase the power of that concentration. So that's all fine. I mean, I've seen a lot of people try to sort of do this with candles, etc., etc., etc. It's fine, but it's not really going to get you far. It's not going to take you to the void again. That's the real point. So what we're doing, so this whole thing is kind of like a process of relaxation and silence, bit by bit, layer by layer. And so what we're then doing here, as we reach the point of concentration, yeah, as I said, concentrating the dispersed rays in the mind. So little bits of the mind are caught up in all the thoughts that just keep coming, and the thoughts will just keep coming and coming and coming. And we actually have to just simply, there's two ways to do it. One, we can just watch them and let them pass, but two, we can discard them. So when the thoughts are actually coming in, the thought comes, we comprehend it, we look at it, and then we discard it. We try to understand the energy or the force that's inside that part, or you can get within that. What do you call it? The energy that's contained within that thought, we release it. So there's like a little bit of desire perhaps in there. Maybe there's a little bit, sometimes there's actually a full ego there. Okay, that's something we can work on later. But generally speaking, it's usually just like a little bit of mental energy sort of trapped in there. Sort of trapped in this silly little thought where I'm worrying about yesterday, or I'm thinking about this thing I have to do tomorrow while I'm trying to sit and meditate. So here I am trying to relax and meditate, and the mind's going, oh, what am I doing tomorrow? I don't really want to go to work tomorrow. I'm tired. I'm itchy. It's a long weekend, wasn't it? I wish it was a long weekend. And this sort of just keeps going. You're just, thinking complete nonsense. So what we do is we then we bring all those together, and that's concentration. We're bringing that together. And again, if the mind is already quite silent, we're simply focusing on the silence. And when everything tries to pull us away, we're bringing ourselves back to the silence. Okay, so the next point is meditation. This is the proper term of actual meditation. We're talking about meditation, we're actually talking about here, which is kind of funny, isn't it? We've got this whole process, and this is actually meditating. Everything else isn't really meditating. The reality is most of what we do is in here. Do you know what I mean? And the depth of what this is, however well we achieve these first three, is how deep we'll go. Yeah, if my pranayama is good, if my breathing technique is good, and I store energy good during the practice, I'm going to have good force. If my separation is done well, yeah, the concentration will be easier, and then it will take me to a good state of meditation. Yes?
So you're saying with the observation of thoughts, until we've achieved the separation from the senses, the observation of thought, that part is really in concentration. We're not going to really be able to observe the thought properly until we've separated from the senses. Within a degree.
I'm not saying it has to be done that way.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? But that's sort of what happens. Like to do in Pratyahara, you're going to have to do a level of that.
Yeah.
You're sort of doing that in Pratyahara as well. You're starting to watch the mind. You still may be doing... You can achieve Pratyahara just through breathing practice. You can also achieve it through beginning the process of concentration by watching the thoughts.
Yeah.
You can do it exactly the same. There's lots of techniques. I'm just explaining various ways.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, you're trying to bring all the dispersed rays in the mind. You can still do that through breath control as well. It's just a lot harder because you can sort of do it through that, but the point is you sort of separate from the senses, and the breathing is going to sort of drag you back. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So you can sort of reach this with breathing technique, but from there you really are working in the mind. You're trying to, so what happens is like this, the mind is constantly trying to sort of swing you out, and sort of as you go through the mind, it's like that. Do you know what I mean? And you sort of slowly, so it's like the mind is trying to sort of pull you away from your concentration. Here you are trying to achieve something, and the mind's just, here's a thought, here's something, what about this, what about that, It's like when you go for a walk at, like Spastic Fair or something, or at, it's the large shopping centre, Pacific Fair in the Gold Coast. But or if you go to, these Westfield or something like that, and everything's trying to sort of steal your attention. Oh, look at this. What is that bit? It's a terrible example. Have you guys seen Zoolander? I know my kids haven't because it's horrible, but it's like when he's like walking down the catwalk and the guy says, "Don't be distracted by the beautiful celebrities," It's like, focus, kill the Prime Minister of Malaysia. But it's like he's got to walk down the the catwalk, and the guy says, "Don't be," and there's all these beautiful like celebrities coming up, like, "Hey man, Slimp Biscuit's there, I think," and all this sort of stuff, and they're all looking, It's like, don't be distracted. You're trying to sort of reach this point, but you do get distracted. That's the reality. You try to work on it, and then this thought comes in, and you're like, "Oh yeah, that's interesting." And you're like, "Oh, no, it's not. It's complete nonsense. Why am I thinking this nonsense right now?" Or like, you're trying, I was sitting there doing a practice beforehand, and I'd been using, what happened? I was looking up something to do with the YouTube today. What was it? I was looking something up at work, and then I accidentally signed out of my account, and it just showed me like, I guess what YouTube shows anyone. And it was all just softcore pornography, basically. It was just all just women in underwear. I was like, whoa, that was just a very strong impression, because it just like shut out, signed in, and suddenly it was all just women in their underwear. "Hey, do you want to watch these videos?" I'm like, "Not really. How do I sign back in so I don't have to see this?" But immediately I was sitting in the meditation before you guys came, and those images just instantly came to the mind. Just these pictures of, oh, press on this, press on this, press on this. And my mind's like, oh, maybe I should go back and press on one of those things. And I'm like, why would I do that? Why? You're sitting there and you're like, mind, why? Why would I do that? And the mind's like, it might be fun. No, it wouldn't be fun. It would not be fun. It would ruin my relationship with my wife. It would make me look weird at my children, who are my girls. Why would I do that? You know what I mean? The mind's like, oh, fine. And that's when you sort of, the mind is speechless, yeah? And then you go, okay, that's it. And you cut that thought. And so we discard. Now the thought is sown to, so then that thought's gone now, yeah? It's sort of on the periphery, it's out. So we're trying to actually bring ourselves like that. You look like you're about to ask me a question. You're holding your thing. Okay, fine. All right, so meditation obviously is when we reach that the state of serene reflection. That's what meditation is also given, we use the term mo chao in Gnosis, which is a Chinese term from Chan Buddhism, from Zen, which means serene reflection. Again, we'll give a whole lecture on mo chao, serene reflection, another day. But once we reach that, that's sort of the depth of what we've reached for the practice. And mostly we stop here in most meditations. Well, let's be honest, a lot of time we don't even get there. But this is sort of, I've reached that point, yeah? The amount of work of concentration I've done, all of this here is going to take me to the level of meditation that I've reached for this practice. Do you understand what I mean? And that's going to be where I can actually work from. So from here, I could work on an ego. I could just sit in the silence and then try to go deeper, which is what we talk about in a moment. I could, observe the thoughts. I could, you could do some mantralization here. That's a bit tricky because you sort of run the risk of pulling yourself out of that state, but you can. Aleph talked about that in his beautiful thing. You want to do mantralization to try and get a deeper state of self-remembering to feel the being, but at the same time in doing so, you lose your state of depth. That's tricky, isn't it? Very tricky. Okay, so, but yeah, from this state, I then have a good state of meditation. I can reflect, etc. I can understand something. Samael gives beautiful teachings where he says, if we want to observe the universe, we should make ourselves the size of the universe and observe the universe. This is from this state. When the meditation is really deep, really profound, if I have to obviously have an incredibly deep state of meditation to be able to make my mind one with the universe and experience the size of universal mind. That's crazy. I'm not saying you can't do it, but I'm saying you need to have a very profound concentration to do that. Same thing, you want to bring your mind down to the size of an atom to study the atom, you need to have a very profound concentration for that meditation to work. As Ravalu said, all of Samael's practices work, we just need to learn to concentrate. This is the main issue. Again, another problem. If my sexual energy isn't concentrated, it's very hard to concentrate as well. That's sort of a problem. That's why we need to do transmutation practices as well as meditation practices. Okay, so the point here, therefore, to take this deeper is to reach the illuminating void. Okay, so the meditation, is to reach a good depth within the mind. To reach the illuminating void is to actually leave the mind. So this is something quite profound. You're not going to reach samadhi every practice. In fact, you might only reach it a few times in your life, yeah, if you're lucky, yeah. The depth, again, samadhi itself isn't a one-off experience. It's not like going to SeaWorld on the Gold Coast or to Movie World. It's not like you're just a one-off thing. I went to the Illuminating Void. How was it? It was pretty good. It was pretty good. I actually quite enjoyed the Illuminating Void. Would you go again? I mean, it was a bit expensive. I might consider the family pass next time, but only if we could get another 2 or 3 people involved. But it's not like that. Do you know what I mean? The illuminating void has levels, it has depth, it has layers within itself. So I may experience that, like as an example, the life-changing experience of illuminating void, like you hear the experience of one of my father's my father's ex-girlfriend. I remember she had an experience of, what's it called now? When she gave birth, she experienced herself as the eternal feminine. So she said, I was one in those moments with everything feminine, the whole of, she said, existence. She said she felt herself as every female blade of grass. That's what she said in that moment. That's an extreme experience of the void. That's beyond. That's a hugely deep experience, yeah? So she's experienced something way beyond the mind, yeah? And as Samael defines it, is that all mental and egotistical processes cease. Yeah, the consciousness liberated from the prison of the mind and the ego experiences reality. Yeah, so it's to experience reality. It's objective consciousness. It's something really profound. And so to reach that level, we make, there are experiences like that. Same with the famous one my father told me about, the man he met in the Theosophical Society who had experienced the void during it was during the Second World War, and he got lost out in the desert, and he experienced himself one with all of the stars, and he felt himself as part of the stars, as the matter of the stars themselves. He experienced such a profound thing. This is a really extreme, or it can be that we experience ourselves just the simple state of void, to experience yourself outside of the mind completely. And in those moments, what do you experience? Joy. The most profound joy. You're really happy. The mind is what makes you miserable. It's funny, everybody wants to increase their mental powers, but the reality is it just makes you suffer. Don't worry, just be stupid and happy. Yeah? That's the story of Don Quixote, huh? The famous Spanish book, Don Quixote by Cervantes, the man of La Mancha. Yeah, that's what it's about. So he's the great intellectual who supposedly loses his mind and then goes off as a knight errant, but he's literally just in a crappy old set of armor with a washpan over his head, going into battle, and he starts fighting and he dies fighting a 4-armed giant, which is actually just a windmill. You know what I mean? And what it's about is, it's actually about just experience. It's like whether, who's crazy? The people who are all miserable living in the mind, or the man who's living joyfully in his own reality.
What's the name of the ship on the
Huh?
Expanse?
Oh, Rocinante. It's the name of his horse.
Oh, there you go.
The Rocinante, yeah. It's beautiful, beautiful work. It's absolutely hilarious. It's very much worth studying. I mean, the bit when he attacks the monks is just amazing. He says he sees like a bunch of cultists coming down, and he just gets his lance and just rides into these monks. It's really quite. Anyway, it's a funny book. Okay. As I went on, so to experience yourself outside, I've had the experience of illuminating void a couple of times, only a couple, but each were very profound and powerful experiences. I experienced myself once. I was meditating, and I experienced myself just completely outside the mind, and where I was. I was sitting in the meditation room, the Lamisia we call it, and I was sitting in the meditation room, and I was sitting up against the wall, and I was meditating with a friend of mine, and I think it was like the middle of the day or something, and then. Yeah, I was just doing the practice. I was going through the process of this. I was doing this practice a lot. I was doing a practice actually trying very specifically through certain exercises, because we got given this in the meditation chamber course, which we'll do, I think it's week 4 or week 5. A very specific practice. And I kept doing it. And then, I experienced, in this moment, I suddenly came to myself, or was aware of myself, and I was just in this white sort of expanse, just like whiteness, like that. And I was no body, nothing, I was just there. And I remember just being completely free and happy. I felt fantastic. And then, I remember, it was like, I was just sort of, just like that. And I don't even know how long I was there. I was just there. And then, it was like a bee was coming, but it wasn't a bee, there was just voice coming from that spot. Kind of like if you read The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, it's like the hopping, when you see the invisible hopping men, and he can't see them, so he just hears a voice kind of moving around. So there's just like this, like a bee, but it was just a noise like that. It was a voice. And it was my voice, but at the time I didn't know. And it went like that, and it just said, "Where am I?" And it was like that. "Where am I?" And I was like... And then another one came out from over here, and it went, "I'm sitting up against the wall in the meditation room." And I went, "No!" And then suddenly, like that, straight back in my body like that. And what they were 2 thoughts, and I got identified with the thoughts. And I suddenly remembered, and suddenly I was sitting there back in the room again. And I was completely soaked. So what was happening is I was experiencing illuminating void like that. And it's funny because Master Wu Wen talks about it in the story of Wu Wen, yeah. And he says, remember, to confront Ursula Minor, and then he realizes after he experiences the void because he's completely soaked. I don't really know what that means. But in the book he says, I suddenly understood because I was covered in sweat. And I'm like, no way, I did it as well. And it was like that. It was like, wow. A beautiful experience. I've had lesser ones after that, but it was a fantastic experience. And so in that moment, I understood, and what entered into me was a knowledge that there was something outside the mind. That's what we call gnosis, hence the term. That's why we call it gnosis. I experienced gnosis. I now knew there was something outside the mind. And this is imperative for a Gnostic person. It's so important that you have some experience outside the mind. It's important, if we've never experienced the void, to make some effort to reach the void. Because once you experience the void, you have your own point of reference. And it's no longer what Mick says, no longer what the Supermaster Samael says. Yeah, it's no longer what I read in the book. It's no longer what I'm trying to read about other authors who talk about it, Ramacharaka, Yogananda, Sri Swami Shivananda, yeah? All these guys talking about the void, yeah? No, it's no longer about them. I now know it's real. It doesn't matter if anyone tells you. Well, you know what I mean? Someone says to you, no, that's not the void doesn't exist. You go, well, I've experienced it. When someone says, what's the truth? You can go, I don't know. But like, you don't know. Because it's like, it was just that white space. You can't really explain that. I experienced something similar a few more times afterwards. But it was a knowledge that went deep into well beyond my physical heart. It went really deep into the soul, you know. The consciousness now knows that there's something beyond the mind. After that, there was no chance of me ever leaving Gnosis ever again, because I had experienced the truth, or a truth.
Are you saying that has to happen in meditation, and do you have to leave the body?
Oh, that's such a complicated thing to ask, right?
Sorry.
You can have lesser experiences of void. I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah. You can have lesser experiences of the consciousness awakening. It's a little bit, it's like that. You can experience the consciousness awakening in daily life, yes, of course. Yeah. But it's a little bit different. It's not quite as profound. You know, in the meditation, you really experience something quite immense. You know what I mean? Like what Weor explains and what I experienced. I've experienced the one you're talking about. Yeah. Separately. It was different. Yeah. It was a profound joy as for a moment the consciousness escaped completely from the mind, and I was completely happy. Yeah. It was the same feeling as the void, but it was different. Yeah. Do you understand what I mean? So you're still experiencing what you would call void nature, which I believe Samael does use that term, but void nature in those moments. And it's true, your mind escapes, you know, but you're still sort of in the physical world. Yes. Still in the body, yeah. Right. Yeah. Right. You can't really experience the void all the time in the world. It doesn't work that way. Yeah. Yes?
So like the Buddha said, you're watching the monkey shadow, you're watching your thoughts.
Yes.
You're not your thoughts. Already you're not your mind.
Yeah.
I mean, even in that minor stage,
yes,
you're already not your mind when you're watching your thoughts from back in.
Oh.
That's what's observing.
That's interesting. Yeah, what's observing?
Yes. It's tricky. The trickiness is it's the mind observing the mind. No, it's true. It's really hard. There's literally, Samael writes a whole chapter on it it's called Observer Observed in the Revolutionary Psychology. Literally that dichotomy of you do this whole practice working on the mind, right? Working on the mind. And then at one point before you reach the gateway between these two is to realize that the mind was doing the practice the whole time. And if you can break out of that, and I remember when we did that, there was a whole practice for this. I remember when we did it, there's a bit where it says you do this whole practice, like 5 steps, and you do all these special breathing exercises, etc. And then you get to the last one. The last one says, up until this moment, there's been one mind working on another part of the mind. And it goes, now you have to see that there's 2 parts and you have to walk in between them and you have to go beyond them. And I remember seeing them and they were like pillars like that. And I had that feeling of like, Samson holding the pillars like that. And I was trying to get past them, but I couldn't get past them. And I was like, I remember feeling like I could see it. My father was leading the practice, and I could see that it was in our meditation room. I could see the pillars, one white and one black, and I couldn't. And beyond them was the void, and I couldn't do it. And I remember being very upset. And it was about a year later I experienced the void of doing that practice a lot. It's so tricky, the mind. You know what's even worse? When you find that you're working on the ego, and then you find that there's been an ego working on the ego. And it's like one of the most profoundly fantastic and also one of the worst experiences of your life. Because you work on it and you suddenly go, oh, and then there's this moment where you're like, so what am I? What am I? You observe your ego for a whole day, and then you get to the end of the day and you're like, so is this just another ego? Because I just spent the whole day properly observing different things entering and exiting the psychology. And then you go, so what am I? It's a beautiful moment to experience the void, because then you really know what you are. Deep, deep, far down, deep in, you know what I mean? And once you feel that, you really want to go back. You know, it's like going to the country that, I don't know if you ever traveled, and then you find a country that you just really enjoy. And then you kind of, there's part of you that just says, I want to go back one day. I like want to die there or something, you know what I mean? That's what it's like. But just way more profound. Good. Okay. Next point. Last point, because we actually need to do a practice, otherwise we're being hugely hypocritical. Don't hit the camera. Good night, children. Okay. So, Samael says something very profound. He says that once we reach this illuminating void, and he said there's lots of, like, for instance, monks that spend their time to reaching the void. He says we then have to put it into activity. So what you're going to experience in that void is the the consciousness outside of the mind and outside of the ego. That's what you're going to experience, okay? So when you experience that, we have to work on the ego. That's what we have to do. And if we, not in that moment, I mean, it should push us to want to work on the ego. And if we don't, Samael refers to that experience of the void as being dead water, meaning like we've experienced that profound lake and then we're just letting it sit. We're not actually then going to try and, because like in that moment, you've experienced what it's like to not have ego. So you should then put that into activity. So I think, again, I think it's incredibly important for a Gnostic person to reach the void at one point, to experience it for themselves. That's why I teach the vigil work. That's why I teach a lot of difficult meditation stuff. That's why I push so strongly Aleph lecture, because all these things lead to the void. That's what they're doing. That's why Aleph did that whole self-remembering thing, because we gave a lecture on fundamental education retreat. We talked a lot about the void. He talks about the importance of experiencing the void. That really hit Aleph hard. The void and self-remembering. We need to have that. So, of course, we need to experience. And then once we experience that, we then really must dissolve that ego. You know what I'm saying? Because then it's like, oh, this is what it's like to have no ego. If you don't, then you just sort of, you can fall again into just being this guy, Mr. Spiritual Sensations, you know? And so you're looking to get the void again, because that was great. You know, I got to get me some void. You got any of those voids? You know what I mean? And that's a terrible joke. But you know what I mean, right? Like, you're just looking to get the void again, and you know, in a sense, you may as well be taking drugs, because it's pretty much the same. It's not the same thing. It's much worse taking drugs. But you know what I mean? Like, we're just looking for that spiritual sensation. We're not dissolving the ego. If we dissolve the ego, we will start to change our whole life. Again, this is why we have to have the good preliminary, because then once I go through this process and I reach that, I'll want to change, because I'm already in the process of dying. I'm already in the process of changing. So this meditation will fall on fertile ground. Our daily meditations will change us. So for Gnosis, to finish, for Gnosis, in Gnosis, and for the Gnostic, meditation is our daily bread. It's our sustenance. Without it, we starve spiritually. Yeah, we feel empty. If we don't do our daily practice, I know I do my daily practice in the morning, so I get up early. I don't do it, I feel famished during the day. I feel empty. I struggle. I suffer, etc. And the other day, I still may have struggles and suffering, but I have that spiritual connection, because I spent my morning in meditation and prayer, you know, and in the evening, I spend some time before bed doing some meditation and prayer. And then, yeah, we increase that over time. Yeah. Yeah, if we don't do that, well, yeah, we feel spiritual poverty. Any questions, my friends, about that? Happy? Yeah. So, as I said, this is just the beginning. This is just the introduction. Every week we're going to go more and more into meditation, and we're also going to start soon. I've got to have a look at the books and see where we're up to. We're also going to start the tarot course. You guys keen on some tarot? Gnostic tarot? I like the Gnostic tarot. We use here the Egyptian tarot. which is wonderful. But we're not just doing it for divination. What was it? Ryan started teaching the runes in Ireland. And I love just how, like, Ryan has such a lack of sort of knowledge of just things in the world. He just doesn't care. And so he said, oh, Mick, did you know the runes are also rocks? And I'm like, yeah, yes, I know that people can cast runic stones. I do know that. And he's like, yeah, like, you know, people just write them on like old pebbles and stuff and they like throw them. And he's like, I don't know, because he only let them in Gnosis and we only use runic postures for energetic work and they use the position of the body. So he had absolutely no idea. So the same thing, when I showed Ryan and said, oh, this is the Egyptian tarot, he's like, there's a different type of tarot. And I'm like, don't worry about it. So yeah, we'll do some work with this as well. We'll start the tarot course as well, so that we can understand not just about divination. I don't really care much for divination. What's important is the esoteric path in the tarot. Plus, if you learn the tarot, really good for dreams. Really good, really good. The archetypes that you put in help you to have a clearer life of dreams. It's very interesting. You know, we don't understand that, but like, it's important for us to have good archetypes, like in the stories read as children, etc., and in the books, because this archetypal knowledge enters into us, and it makes it much easier for us to understand our dreams. Much easier. And also that archetypal knowledge speaks to you. It's beautiful. You know, the being can talk to you much, much clearer and easier through the astral, as opposed to, you know, like, you're spending your time just watching zombie movies or something, and you know, you're trying to, what's the being got to do to give you an experience? You know, you're like, I was being attacked by zombies all night, you know? What do you think it means? I'm like, I don't know, man. You've been watching a lot of zombie films? Yeah, I do. You want to have spiritual dreams, you want to have spiritual experiences, you got to be a spiritual person. You got to create a rich interior life, yeah?
So you don't have archetypes coming from the show Naruto.
Naruto archetypes. Believe it.